All right, we're moving right along to chapter 9, human development. We'll start again with a vignette. Go ahead and read this if you so choose. All right, so jumping right in, developmental psychology is what the focus is of this chapter. So, again, if this is kind of the track you're leaning towards, you can take a whole semester on developmental psych. So, it's a field in psychology, it relates to all ages from birth to death. A lot of people think that human development focuses just on children, but actually it focuses on the whole age related time from, your first breath to your last breath. And it's looking at all the physical components, all the cognitive thinking elements, and socio emotional changes that happen over the course of your life. All right, so when we look at the development physically, this is when you're looking at how your body is developing as a whole organism biologically in this unpredictable pattern. So it goes, we're moving right along to chapter 9, human development. All right, so again, beginning of the chapter starts off with a vignette that'll carry you all the way through. This one is focusing on a girl named Erica. All right, so jumping right in, developmental psychology. If you're thinking of entertaining this field, you could take a whole semester in your undergrad on human development. And when you're looking at that, you're not just looking at babies like you see on the screen. Human development goes through the whole lifespan, as some people say, from the womb to the tomb or from birth to death. So it's a field in its own that looks at age related issues physically, cognitively, and socio emotionally, and how this changes through the course of your lifetime. When we look at human development, we look at three components. We're looking at physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional. So when you look at physical, this is how you're supposed to be developing through your life in a what is called a quote unquote predictable pattern, how you mature and grow in each stage. And then your cognitive development, that includes all of the things and developments in your memory, how you problem solve, decisions you make, language intelligence, all the other chapters that we cover encompass this one broad, umbrella of human development. And then socio-emotional development, those are all of your social behaviors, your emotions, all the things that change due to your upbringing, due to your life experiences and your relationships and your overall disposition. So the things that are given to you genetically. All right, let's go back to that. All right. So when psychologists are looking at development, they do different types of study methods. They have the cross-sectional, longitudinal, and cross-sequential. These are all methods, if you're interested in this, of how they examine people through different portions of your life. All right, so we're not collaborating. So now what I'm going to cover is kind of really a lot of the dry stuff that I'm not going to focus on. This is all of your genetic components from the time you're conceived till you're born. So a lot of this is biological stuff. So they talk about your chromosomes, your DNA, and your genes. So your chromosomes are um, your inherited structures that are given to both birth parents, as well as your DNA and genes. So chromosomes are inherited thread-like structures composed of deoxyribonucleic acid. Say that 3 times fast. Otherwise known as your DNA. Your DNA is the molecule that provides the instructions for the development and production of cells. And then your genes are the specific segment of that DNA molecule. So these things are just broken down into smaller parts. All right, every cell in your body except your red blood cells and sex cells contains the full set of 23 chromosome pairs that are shown here. Primary component of each chromosome is a single tightly wound molecule of DNA. And then within that DNA are about 20,000 genes. And all of those small little genetic components are what help determine from both, mom and dad, what your traits are going to be. Specifically like your hair texture. Just something like that alone comes from those DNA molecules. All right, so how exactly did you get your genes from your biological parents? They're found in chromosomes. Chromosomes are then inherited from your biological parents. And then the sperm and egg contain 23 chromosomes. So that's where you get the 23 pairs. Your XX are your female chromosomes, and then your XY are your male. All right, so know the difference between the two sets of twins. You've got your monozygotic and your dizygotic. Your monozygotic are your identical, and then your dizygotic are your fraternal. So obviously your dizygotic can only be, it cannot be identical. So it has to be, it can be two males, two females, but they won't look alike, and or male, female. So you cannot have monozygotic twins and have one be a boy and girl. All right, so when we're looking more at development, you see dominant genes, one of a pair of genes that has power over the expression of an inherited characteristic. So that just means like brown is a dominant gene, blue is a recessive gene. So the recessive genes are the ones that are not as powerful, obviously, as the dominant. All right. All right, you've got your genotype and your phenotype. Genotype, individual's complete collection of genes. Very interesting if you ever are into genotypes or looking at genetics or development. You might have to, if you're going into psychology, you might have to make a genogram, which is a pretty cool thing to make. It's kind of like an ancestry .com 23andme type of thing where you find all of your genetic relatives and you put them into this kind of graph, and it shows you your complete collection of your genetics from, could be thousands of years back. Well, I don't know about thousands, hundreds. I don't know why I had thousands in my brain. Okay, so this now is getting into, from the time of conception, traveling all the way down and all the terms of what they are. So your germinal period is when what is going to be the baby implants on the wall, and that's when things are rapidly growing. So that's, you need to take care of yourself throughout your whole pregnancy, but during this specific time, especially first trimester, first 3 months, this is when everything is most critical. You have your embryonic period, that's third week to about 2 months. There's cell differentiation, formation of all the major organs. The heart starts beating. The spinal cord and intestinal systems develop by the end of this period. And then the fetal period, this is kind of when now things are kind of put in place. And now this is when the weight starts happening, all the rapid weight gain. Clear sleep wake cycles, all organ systems and structures are fully developed at birth, but they are rapidly growing at this point. And then the brain weight is 1/4 of the size of an adult. This is just a graph that shows you, it helps you better to see the germinal period through the fetal period and then full term. So it tells you all of the, what is going on what am I saying? Not birth-wise, developmentally wise. Hello, the name of the chapter, from the beginning all the way to about 40 weeks. Teratogens, you want to know what teratogens are. These are harmful substances, basically, that you put into your body when you're pregnant, when a mother is pregnant. So you don't want to do things like drink and smoke and do drugs and all that kind of stuff, because obviously it can damage the fetus. So they say zygote, embryo, or fetus because you start off as a zygote to embryo, then fetus. And what this is a picture of this little beautiful girl is a result of fetal alcohol syndrome. Now, although this particular picture doesn't look, um, alarming, some women that drink when they're pregnant will have this kind of characteristic of the eyes that are separated. And when it's very prominent, you'll see a lot more separation and it's more profound. So this is definitely know that fetal alcohol syndrome is teratogen. All right, so now when we're looking at infancy and child development, so newborn senses, everything to them is blurred. So they can barely see anything past like their own little body. So vision is blurry for the first few months. So that's why when you are, it's very important when moms and dads are, loving on their baby that they're very close to them. They prefer human faces, and it makes sense, because it's what they are, evolutionary. They're going to prefer human faces over any types of shapes. Auditory system functions before birth, still continues to develop after the baby's born. They can discriminate the mother's voice shortly after birth because they've been listening to the mom throughout the whole pregnancy. Smell and taste are well developed in infants. Distinguish smell of mother's breast milk. They prefer sweet taste, react to sour taste, notice differences in breast milk taste. So basically, whatever the mother ingests, the child ingests that at a larger rate. So, a lot of times if the mother drinks or eats anything spicy, it'll come out in the breast milk as well. And sense of touch is evident before birth, so they are capable of experiencing pain. All right, so moving on to the newborn reflexes. Let me see. Okay, now let me go back. All right, so they're automatic responses to stimuli. You have to remember when an infant is in the womb, they are there for 9 full months, so they are bundled up tightly, which is why they love being swaddled when they come out in those blankets. Some parents don't want to wrap them up like a burrito, but they actually love it. It's comforting to them because when they come out, it's like their legs are flinging all over the place. So reflexes are automatic. Some are necessary for survival. They may fade away in the first weeks and months of life. And you have examples like rooting, sucking, and grasping. These are all developmental milestones for an infant. All right, so this is more on the growing brain. We're not going to worry about this right now. So if you look at this picture of the brain development, infant's brain grows rapidly during the first year of life, more than doubling in size. You can see from all the way here to here. There's dramatic growth in axon length and synapses. Additionally, myelin is increasing significantly around axons, improving the efficiency of neural communication. The myelinated white matter is shown in these scans where you can see that. Very important for protection of the brain. Language explosion. Babies come into the world incapable of using language, but by around 6 years old, most have amassed a vocabulary of about 13,000 words. It's really important for the language acquisition. I'm going to move on. So yes, moving into language acquisition, across cultures, a vocabulary explosion tends to occur about 2 to 3 years of age. Again, everything is dependent on developmental milestones. Very important to be exposed to language early in life, throughout life, but especially when a child is first born. Up until 7 is usually about the most critical time. So when you're looking at milestone, cooing is about 2 to 3 months. That's when you're hearing that ooh, ah, babbling, 4 to 6 months. That's the one word phrases like mama or dada. Your hollow phrases happen about 12 months. And that's when they're trying to get a message across by just saying like juice, they point to things or up. And then their telegraphic speech happens around 18 months, and that's when they can say those 2-word phrases. This is a video of Jeannie, the feral child. Now, I'm going to send this in a message so that you can actually watch this instead. So Jeannie was basically, she could not master any linguistics because she was horrifically abused as a child. For about 13 years, she was neglected. She was deprived of any physical touch or love or anything. Um, Her father was very abusive, and he didn't allow his wife or son to give Jeannie any type of affection. And he even had her strapped to a potty chair every single day. And she was strapped down. She could not move the whole day. And there's an interesting, um, well, this is the video, but I'm gonna send that to you guys for you to watch, and I want you to watch this. But the important takeaway from here is that scientists really tried working with Jeannie to help her build her vocabulary, because the important thing to remember is she wasn't cognitively deficient. Like she was not, as they say in the video, mentally retarded. There was nothing wrong with her because of any physical nature. It was because she was deprived of language, not saying anything. And so, because of that, her brain basically shrunk and she was not stimulated with words. So, therefore, she cannot create any words back. And it's really sad. So, but there's the link for it, but I'm going to also send it to you. Piaget's developmental theory, you've got, he's got 4 stages that I'm going to go over. And his terms, to be familiar with: schema, assimilation, and accommodation. So these are Piaget words. So he was one of the first to suggest infant cognitive abilities, and humans are biologically driven to advance intellectually. So his 4 stages, so know these stages: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete, and formal. So in the sensory motor stage, you are learning object permanence. That's the monkey see monkey, or not monkeys, what am I saying? That is the peekaboo. So children are very egocentric. So when you do peekaboo and you put your arms over or your eyes over your, oh my gosh, listen to me, your hands over your eyes, they actually think you're gone because they can't think in terms outside of that. So that's why they laugh and think it's great, because they think you're actually playing magic. Pre-operational is egocentrism stage and conservation errors. I'm going to pop in some videos for you to watch on this too. And then you've got your concrete operational, where they can start thinking logically, and then formal operational. That's when that thinking outside the box takes place. All right, so conservation, before they can, they develop this, they can look and see these 2 beakers of water, and they can watch you pour it into a glass, and they'll tell you that this one has more water in it. Even though they watched you with the same amount, it's not because they're stupid or they don't understand, they don't understand. They're not cognitively developed to understand that. So volume and mass, they are not aware of that until their next developmental stage. But some criticisms of his theory: object permanence does occur sooner, they're finding out, and the formal operational stage may not be the last stage. Distinctions are needed between adolescents and adults of various ages. Then you have Vygotsky's cognitive development. His key terms are scaffolding and zone of proximal development. So he was interested in how social and cultural factors affect a child's cognitive development. And he believed that children were like apprentices to others who are more capable and experienced. So other Other children can help children, other adults scaffold and help, um, children understand different areas of their development. All right, you need to know what temperament is. Look at a cute little baby. Characteristic differences in behavior patterns and emotional reactions that are evident from birth. You've got your high reactive infants and your low reactive infants. Those infants exhibit much distress with unfamiliar stimuli. A lot of this is, very genetic. If the parent is a reactive parent, usually the child will be reactive. And then your low reactive infants, they don't really respond to stimuli with great distress. Okay, so within your temperament, you've got your easy, your difficult, and your slow to warm up infants. So your easy ones, they're the dream babies. They follow schedules easily. When they're crying, you pick them up, they're soothed easily. Your difficult ones, they're erratic, they transition poorly, they're irritable and unhappy, and that occurs in about 10%. And then you're slow to warm up, they're just not really, they don't like change. It's not that they're difficult, it's just, it takes them a little longer. That's all. And then more than one type of temperament can be found in 35% of infants. This is another video I'm going to pop in. This is the Ainsworth study on attachment. It's called The Strange Situation. And we look at secure attachment, avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized. Obviously, your secure attachment is the one that you hope to, give out there to your children. And this comes from, responding to their needs, loving them, making sure that they know that when they cry, they're going to be picked up and soothed. All right, so critics of the strange situation, most of early work used mothers. Subsequent research should examine attachment to multiple caregivers. Again, a lot of these studies on development predated a lot of these new, different parenting environments. Artificial environment created and does not mirror natural environment because this was a lab study, so it's not going to mirror or, an actual true situation. And then cross-cultural differences were not always addressed. This is another video that I popped in here. The reason I'm not showing it, along with this presentation is that it would take too long in the video. So I will just send these separately, but you at least have them embedded. So the Harlow monkey is another old experiment, but it's an interesting experiment on comforting just based on a cloth and a wire. So there was this monkey and it was given this artificial surrogate mother, has all these, bells, whistles, or these are all the bells and whistles, but this, it looks bizarre to me, but the monkey is wired on a rear cloth, so it's comforting and soothing. All right, we're going to skip along here. All right, so we move on to Erikson's stages of development. Okay, now Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development are probably the most studied. It's the one that you will write your paper on. It's usually the one that in most colleges, they're gonna have you do an Erikson paper. All right, so Erikson proposed that human development is marked with 8 psychosocial stages of development. So you had Freud, my good old boy Freud, who had psychosexual stages of development, and Erikson was like, okay, it's more plausible that we follow these psychosocial stages. So he suggested that each stage has this task that, this conflict that they have to resolve. And if they don't, then they go to, it's kind of like a yin yang. It's a positive and a negative. And if they don't resolve that, they can't really get to the next stage until that's resolved. So if there is no resolution, it kind of just spills over. So you've got your trust versus mistrust, that's birth to a year, autonomy versus shame and doubt, 1 to 3, initiative versus guilt, 3 to 6. So in these developmentally, beginning ones, From birth to year, trust versus mistrust. The child is learning how to trust, and how they learn to trust is from the parent, um, based on how they're loved and cared for. So if they are in a trusting environment, they're going to learn from the very beginning to trust other people, to have faith that other people will be there for them when they need them, when they cry, when they're wet, when they need to be changed and fed. Then you move into, if that is not resolved, then already they're not going to trust others, and they're all automatically at that young age going to think the worst of other people. And that's why when, younger people like teenagers into high school, when they have trust issues, this doesn't just happen overnight. This stems from birth. Then you've got 1 to 3, that's autonomy versus shame and doubt. So being autonomous, you're learning how to kind of explore on your own and be independent and learn how to do little things. And if you know, you're autonomous and your parents or your caregivers kind of keep nurturing you, then you're going to move on to the next stage. If not, you're going to have this shame and doubt, and you're going to feel this shame, and you're not going to be able to explore because you're going to feel like you're doing something wrong. So if you have a parent that lets you be autonomous and you're exploring, and maybe you get into something, but they're like, they tell you no, but in a little sense they explain why, versus yelling at you and making you feel like you did something wrong. So you will start developing that doubt if the parent does not relay that in a positive message. And then moving up 3 to 6, that's your initiative versus guilt. So this is the time when you're learning to become more responsible. You're learning to, follow directions. And when you follow directions, you obviously move to the next stage. But if you make mistakes, and you're told that's not good, or you did this wrong, or you're shamed for things, then you're going to feel this sense of guilt. And that's when anxiety already starts building up. And you start developing that kind of sense that you can't handle any responsibility because of the guilt that you feel for messing up. So it's really all up to the parent on how they handle situations when a child kind of messes up. And then moving into adolescence, this is that transitional period from childhood to adulthood. This is kind of that wonky stage. You go through puberty. So this is when things are developing, your bodies are changing, you're becoming sexually mature, you're exploring, you're just learning about who you are and all that your body encompasses. And during adolescence, all these things are happening. Your primary sex characteristics, secondary, and then menarche and spermarche. So know these two terms. Menarche is basically a woman's period, first period, and then spermarche is a male's first ejaculation. So those are those two terms. All right, so timing of puberty is influenced by genetics, diet, exercise, and exposure to chemicals. So a lot of this can, like when your mom started her period, or menarche, whatever you want to call it, a lot of how you develop is going to be how your, mother developed, or father. STIs are your sexually transmitted infections. More than half of 15 to 24-year-olds are affected with new infections. It's kind of scary. It used to be 90% of people that had sex already had HPV. Numbers are going down a little bit, but it's still around 80%. Um, so it's really important to, be safe. And if there is any types of infections, that they get treated. But the problem is a lot of adolescents will go untreated. They don't want to go to the doctor. They don't want to tell their parents. And that's when, really messed up infections can happen. All right, so cognitive development in the formal operations in Piaget, use of deductive reasoning and critical thinking begins at this stage. So being able to abstract reasonably, sorry, being able to classify different things, being able to use symbols, thinking beyond the here and now, looking at the future, looking at future possibilities, thinking outside, looking at hypotheticals. That happens in the formal operational stage. Your adolescent egocentrism, intense focus is on your own self and your feelings. This is kind of the when you think that you're indestructible and nothing bad can happen to you. So because of that, and the brain's not fully developed, this is, when adolescents take riskier behaviors. So the adolescent brain, significant limbic system development compared with the prefrontal cortex can lead to your riskier behaviors. Increased myelination of axons occurs in the prefrontal cortex that is not fully developed. So your frontal lobe is not fully developed. So when people make, really poor decisions, that's what leads into this picture here. Should this influence the decision about teenagers and the death penalty? Not an excuse, but because brains are not fully developed, that's kind of their argument towards going against the death penalty. All right, in Erickson's stage of ego identity versus role confusion, that's the next stage. So again, this is the positive, this is the negative. So it involves, learning who you are, trying out new roles for yourself, influenced by positive resolution and success at earlier stages. So when those earlier stages are positive, then chances are these are going to be. So if there's a positive resolution, you're going to have a strong sense of values, beliefs, and goals. That's the ego identity because you know who you are. You're comfortable with who you are. But if there is a negative resolution, then that's when that role confusion comes in because you don't know who you are because of maybe what somebody told you who you should be. So when you know who you are, but someone's telling you something else or something different, you can become confused. Parents and adolescents, so relationships between teens and parents generally positive. Conflict does happen. It's normal. Kids don't get along with their parents at a certain age, and then it goes back to to the norm. Parent-teen struggles often relate to issues of control, parental authority, and may resolve around everyday matters such as curfews and chores. It's kind of the biggest thing that kids and parents fight over. The adolescent is breaking away. They're learning to become independent and kind of like a mini adult, and they want to be an autonomous person. So both have to, for a good relationship and for a good outcome, parents need to kind of negotiate with their kids and let them be autonomous and, still have those established rules, but be able to be comfortable with that new sense of the child is growing up. And if that happens, then obviously the next stage is going to be positive, hopefully. All right, so looking at social media and psychology, average US teenager spends about 4 to 6 hours a day. So good news, bad news. Good news, social media can provide safe medium for exploration, facilitate friendship building. But then on the negative side, overusing it has caused mental health issues, anxiety, depression, because, adolescents are focusing more on their devices, so they're isolating from human contact. All right, we're going to skip over that. Kohlberg's stages, we're not going to really cover that, but his stages are pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. It's nothing that you will need to know for the test, but just kind of looking at what his stages are. You've got your pre-conventional, and then you can look at this moral understanding, and then this is based on a little story. So right and wrong are determined by the consequences. Hines should not steal the drug because he may go to jail if caught. So a pre-conventional is going to say, hey, if I do this, you shouldn't go because he might get caught and he might go to jail. Conventional, because society says a husband must take care of his wife, Hines should steal the drugs so that others won't think poorly of him. Or Hines should not steal because stealing is against the law. So if you're going for the good part of the conventional is you don't steal because it's against the law. Post-conventional, this is where you're your morals override everything. So you don't steal because it's not the right thing to do. That's basically it in a nutshell. All right, so we can skip all that. So now the next one into Erickson's stages, emerging into adulthood, 18 to 25, influenced by dependency on families for longer periods of time, provides opportunities for seeking relationships, education, and new world views. All right, we're going to skip over that. Your early adulthood. During this time in your development, muscular, cardiovascular are at the sharpest. Your sensory systems are starting to decline, and then fertility related changes start occurring. When you get into your middle adulthood, genes influence height and bone mass. Exercise slows the shrinking process, so it's very important in adulthood. Well, it's important all the time, but to really exercise to kind of slow that process down. You've got your wrinkles, sagging, your hair thins, turns gray, hearing loss, bones weaken, menopause, and andropause. This just sounds frightful. This isn't fun. Ugh. Then your late adulthood, this again is following Erickson. Vision starts deteriorating. Well, this is not Erickson. We'll get back into that. Your hearing declines. Exercise again will foster those neurons just firing. So it's not too late to ever start an exercise workout routine. Cognitively, early adulthood, measures of aptitude remain stable. Processing speed begins to decline. When you get to middle and late, cognitive functioning start to decrease. This is, leading to Alzheimer's. If it's, especially if it's genetic, you want to keep consistently learning new things. After age 70, decline is more apparent. Then you have your crystallized in your fluid intelligence. Basically, your crystallized intelligence, if you think about it like crystallized, it's kind of what stays, it's developed. Your fluid intelligence is what declines after 70. Fluid, if you think of it like a wave, like it keeps just going, this is you become less fluidity is declining because you're learning new things, learning new, learning new ways of doing things, learning new measures, just learning. You're not as fluid as when you were younger, so that starts rapidly declining. All right, so jumping back into Erickson, you've got then the next stage, intimacy versus isolation. So again, you're young adult. If this is when you're learning intimacy, being able to connect with somebody, not sexually, yes, but that's not what I mean. And if you don't, obviously, if this is a positive resolution, this is where you form your deep relationships. But again, if you're already not developing the previous stages, it just spills over into this, and then you're not going to develop intimacy because there'll be trust issues. And then people isolate because they don't feel like they can connect with people or trust anybody. Moving on, middle adulthood, this is generativity versus stagnation. So a positive resolution to this stage is you're going to feel like, okay, I've worked, I've had a good life, I made an impact. The next generation may benefit because of me, so my kids will benefit from my teachings. But again, if you're not generative, it leads to that stagnation. So failure manifests as boredom, conceit, and selfishness. So it's really just being all about yourself, not caring about others, and leaving anything for your children to look at you and say, yeah, that was my parents that did that. And then late adulthood, integrity versus despair. So positive resolution, you feel at the end of your life that, wow, I've accomplished something. I have a legacy to leave my grandkids. I did well in life. I was a good person. But again, if none of your kids are talking to you and you have no friends, then obviously that's going to lead into that despair, feeling like you made nothing, you contributed nothing to the world. leaving you very regretful and dissatisfied that you had nothing. This is just that feeling a person, feels when they look back on their life and they're like, wow, I did nothing. And this is why the suicide rates are highest for elderly, not young people like a lot, think. It's actually elderly. All right, and then you have your parenting styles. Know this, you've got your authoritarian, your authoritative, permissive, and uninvolved. You want to strive to be the authoritative parent. Majority of research on these parenting styles has been conducted in the US. Other factors like home environment, child's temperament, personality, and parent-child relationships are important. So let's go back here. So your authoritarian parent is your, in the book, it goes more in depth, but your authoritarian is like your dictator parent. Do what I say, not as I do. They impose all of these rules on you, but they don't give you explanations. So maybe you did something wrong and you really might not know what you did. Or you may need, like, I didn't really think it was that bad. But you get no explanation. That's the authoritarian parent. Just do what I say. Um, what was I going to say? I was going to say something past that. But those are the ones that, then the children grow up and they either become authoritarian parents too, or they're very, angry people. So that's the whole do what I say, not as I do. Your authoritative parent, that's the one you want to be. That's the balanced parent. They impose rules and punishment, but the punishment fits the crime. So that's the one that when you do something wrong, your parent's going to say, hey, listen, I'm not really happy because you snuck out and the cops found you. I don't even know. But, what was going on? And then they're going to say, well, I knew you wouldn't let me stay out. And the parent would say, well, you're right, I wouldn't. But, it's just things can happen. And, then the parent will explain, dangers of being out all night or whatever. And maybe they'll say, I'm going to give you a warning this time, but, next time there's going to be a consequence. So they explain, the situation. And even though honestly, if your kid sneaks out, you can ground them, obviously, but the child that's going to listen more, the one that's going to feel respected, the one that's not going to want to disappoint you is the one that is raised by the authoritative parent that says, hey, listen, not happy about what you did, so let's talk about it. Your permissive parent is the absolute opposite of the authoritarian. This is the one that does not impose rules. This is the one that is like, hey, let me be your best friend. Maybe they do drugs together, or they drink together, or they're like, hey, come home whenever you want. If you want to come home at 6 in the morning, go ahead. So that's not positive parenting because then the child runs the show. And that leads to a lot of not healthy behaviors as well. And then your uninvolved parenting is just that, not involved. Very little involvement. Really not much to say about this because it's kind of it's explainable just in the term. All right, let's go. Okay, the last thing I really want to cover is the Kubler-Ross death and dying. A lot of people have already heard this. So know this. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I will explain this as it relates to dying, and then I will explain it as it relates to relationships because a lot of my teenagers love it when I relate it to that. So let's go to dying. You get a diagnosis that, maybe it's cancer, maybe it's something, and you've got 6 months. Kubler-Ross's theory states that, okay, you first are in denial, like, no, there's no way. I took good care of myself. There's no way I'm dying. This has to be a mistake. I've got to go to the doctor again. So the person does not believe that the diagnosis is true. Now let's flip it to the relationship. You get broken up with, and you're like, no way. You're not breaking up with me. This is a joke. All right, you're punking me. All right, who's videoing this? So you're just not, there's no way. It's like, I didn't see that coming. All right, no, you're not breaking up with me. Okay, let's talk about this. So they don't accept that the relationship is ending. All right, now let's move to the next stage. Now it's like denial is over. Now you're angry. So now with dying, you're angry at God, you're angry at higher power, you're angry at the world, you're angry at whoever. And you're like, why me? I took care of myself. I don't deserve this. There's other people worse than me. Why am I the one that's dying? You get angry now. So now it's set in that it's happening, and now you're just pissed off about it. Now let's discuss the relationship. You get broken up with. Now you're angry. You're breaking up with me? You're not breaking up with me. I'm breaking up with you. You're the worst person I ever dated in my life, anyways. And you're just so angry. This is when I hate you. I never cared about you, anyways. I hope, and then insert whatever you want to say. So now you're so angry because, like, how dare you? How dare this happen? Okay, now you move past the anger, okay? Now again, these don't go in perfect stages. So according to Kubler-Ross, you now move to the bargaining stage. So now when it comes to death, you're bargaining. You're like, all right, listen. Okay, God, I know that I didn't take really good care of myself, but listen, I promise from here on out, I'm going to take better care of myself. And if you just let me live, then I will not eat all that bad food. I will not smoke anymore. I won't do all this bad stuff. So now you're just bargaining. Well, now when it flips to relationships, it's okay, listen, uh, whatever your name is. All right, so, uh, Johnny. Oh, I hate using that. Okay, so listen, I promise I'll be a better girlfriend. I promise I'll dress better. I will, listen to you more. I promise I won't, just give me another chance. Give me another chance and I'll be better. So you're bargaining to keep that relationship when really it's over. Um, so then once you realize, okay, now dying, it's settling in and you're like, oh my gosh, this is real, then the depression sets in because you realize that, okay, there's no going past this. Uh, I'm gonna die, so I don't know what to do, and that's when that immense sadness comes in. For the relationship, it's it could be severe weight gain, weight loss. It's just a sense of I don't want to do anything. That was my world. I love them so much. Why did this happen? And there's no energy to even be angry because you're so depressed. Now, the critics of Kubler-Ross was that she said these went in stages, but what we see is that they go through stages. So you can be depressed, pull out of that depression, and you can bargain again, or you can be angry again. You're coming out of that, and you're like, I just can't believe he broke up with me, or she broke up with me, or whatever the case is. So it doesn't go in a fluid, stage from denial to acceptance. However, when typically when you get to the acceptance part of death, you know it's happening and there's the sense of peace. You're not happy, but you're like, again, like with Erickson stages, you accept it, you realize that life is what it is, and hopefully you feel like I did the best I could. So you accept it and you enjoy the little time you have left, or the time you have left, I should say, with family and loved ones, enjoying the rest of your life if you can. When it comes to relationship acceptance, that is, all right, I can now see you walking down the hall with somebody else. I can hear your name without cringing. I can see you and my heart doesn't drop. You have accepted the loss and you can maybe look back on the good or maybe the not good, but it doesn't affect you anymore. And that is my explanation of death and dying and relationships via Kubler-Ross. So know that for sure for your final. All right, so resilience is another great, positive psychology is another class you can take, and you'll learn a lot about positive psychology and being resilient. And this goes back to the vignette, or I'm sorry, yes, this goes back to the vignette from the beginning of the story. if you want to check that out. So that is it for today. That was a lengthy video. My camera thing is frozen for some reason. So go ahead, watch the video, pause, stop. I will be inserting the links very soon. And with that, you don't see me, but I am giving you the old peace sign. So see you in the next video. I'll have it fixed.